Welcome to my show. I'm a guest here. Her name is Lisa Babinsak. Mrs. Lisa, how are you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. And also, thanks so much for the time and the opportunity, Mrs. Lisa. Firstly, you
Yeah.
are an author. You are also into some other activities when it comes to mentoring and also coaching. Can you please, Mrs. Lisa, discuss more about yourself and how you're doing currently now, Mrs. Lisa?
Well, my journey has been a long one. I had a what seemed to be a very successful life from the outside when I lived in the States. And my first career was in the wine industry and then interior design, designing product as well as designing homes. And something in me was dying though. And I couldn't pinpoint it, but I just knew I couldn't go on like that. And so I took a vacation to Mexico in 2017, never intending to move. I just was feeling that's Maisie in the background. um, she likes to join in. But I knew that something in my life needed to change. I didn't know where to start though, and I was not planning when I came to Mexico to move. I just came for vacation. But once I got to Puerto Vallarta, is where I went, I just knew I had to move. And I followed my gut. So I literally moved 2 months later and with nowhere to live, no job, nothing. I just took a leap of faith because I knew that I could not continue my life as it was because my soul was dying. And I expected that the move to Mexico would be lighten that for me, but it kind of did the opposite. It because in the States, life is so full speed all the time and you're constantly working and society is about packing away anything that doesn't feel comfortable. You just pack it away and you keep going, and that's what I did for years. But once I came to Mexico and life slowed down, and Mexico has an energy too that elevates what's hidden, and it started surfacing, and there were things that happened where my life further dismantled, and I really broke down to uh, where I got in a deep, deep, deep spiritual awakening. And the writing came out of that. I started writing about not about woe is me, but transforming and alchemizing what I went through and expressing it in a way that hopefully can help other people.
It's so
So right now, my writing is, just about, trying to reach other people who are going through similar things.
it's so beautiful, to be honest with you, Mrs. Lisa, to spend a lot of time in a country like the United States and decide to just take a break in Mexico and decide to just be like, I think I need to stay here. That shows that there are a lot of reasons that goes by the way you want to move there. And moving there was not going to be easy, and you knew that from the beginning. And facing all the triumphs, the ups and downs when you got to the country is very beautiful. It shows how strong you are and how you dedicated yourself to write something that is so beautiful. And that is why I would like to drive to that point, Mrs. Lisa. The reframes. Can you please discuss more on that book? And also, do you plan to write more of that in the coming future, Mrs. Lisa?
Yes, the reframes. Well, I have to be very clear. I was never a writer. I never wanted to be a writer. Um, I, in the last two, so when I first moved to Mexico, I moved to Puerto Vallarta, but 2 years ago, I moved to San Miguel de Allende. And, my life further dismantled in Puerto Vallarta. I had big betrayals in my business. My business that I had built there collapsed. It was overwhelming. And I thought when I moved to San Miguel that San Miguel would hold me gently, but it didn't. It pushed me off the cliff. And there were times I really didn't even think I could continue on. And sorry. But then the writing just emerged, but not me sitting down and thinking, I'm going to write about this. It just started flowing through me. And it was all what I had lived and experienced and how I had lived my life. But I never really thought about it. It's just flown through me. It has flowed through me, rather. And so the reframes are there's 8 reframes on familiar spiritual concepts where I reframe them and turn them upside down. For example, the cult of glitter is one of the first ones. It's kind of a manifesto that establishes everything else. I mean, I push back on the current spiritual this the current spiritual climate, and because it's so monetized and it's so Instagram, it's all about Instagram, and I'm not criticizing from afar or above. I'm not criticizing, I'm critiquing after having been in it myself. I also tried that route. I desperately wanted to, unlike some people, I mean, I really wanted to awaken. And I wasn't afraid of the hard parts of that, but many people are afraid of the hard part and that don't want to get into the ugly, dirty part of it. But that's the only way to true transformation and awakening is to deal with that part of it. And so the cult of glitter is a critique of the current spiritual climate that's been, going on for 25 years. It's all bypass. It's bypassing the reality of what you really have to go through to awaken. And I think that that's a huge injustice to people because for years, that's all I knew as a vehicle. And I tried and tried, but what would happen is I'd get a momentary lift and feel like, oh, I feel great. And then 2 days later, you're back where you were because you never crossed the threshold. And so, it reframes that you have to go through
Yeah.
the ugly, dirty parts of it to come to the other side. And then there's the threshold at the crossing, which is another reframe where mostly people get to that threshold and they stop. And and they put on this robe that looks like enlightenment and clarity, and oftentimes it shows itself as spiritual ego, where they're the first person to criticize you and what you're not doing correctly in your journey, yet they're the one drinking to oblivion every night and avoiding connection and sleeping with everybody. It's like they're the first to criticize, but they're not really living it themselves. That's spiritual ego, and many people get stuck in spiritual ego thinking that they've awakened. But when you truly have, you're not criticizing others. You honor their journey, but you realize their journey is their own, and that you can't tell them what to do. You need to stay in your own. You can hold them through it, but you can't, critique them. And so the reframes, there's 8 of them. I started with 6, and then the other 2 just appeared. I was coming from Pilates one day, and I was driving home, and dismantling as completion, which is the 7th one, just kind of downloaded as I was driving home. And then I thought I was totally done with them. This is how the writing comes to me, though. It just comes. And then I realized I was getting ready to post the bare boned on my Substack. And as I was preparing that, I realized there was a crucial piece missing, and that was trauma as curriculum. So that then came and became the 8th reframe. So trauma as curriculum is a very interesting, it's kind of the foundation of the rest of the reframes. A kind of overview of the reframes is if you believe, as I believe, as many people believe, that our soul chooses the family we incarnate into for the lessons and the growth it will give our soul. If you believe that, you have to follow that thread all the way through. And so that means that everything in that incarnation is part of your lessons and growth or your curriculum. But people tend to compartmentalize trauma and the not so pretty things into they're compartmentalizing them as not part of that journey. But if you believe that, that thread carries all the way through, and trauma is a crucial part of our curriculum. Because if we look at it as such, then it's not something that happens to us, it happens for us in the sense that we have the agency to decide what we do with that trauma. We are no longer the victim if we realize it's part of our curriculum and growth, and we can metabolize that to grow from it and learn from it. And that's really what our souls are here for, is to learn from everything we experience, the good, bad, and the ugly. And that's the
Thank,
foundation of all of the reframes.
thank you so much about on the insight, which is the eight reframes that you are into currently now. And that is why I love the perspective you say trauma is something we have to deal with. And also every single one of us have a journey we want to go through. We shouldn't diagnose or try our best to manipulate one person because we want to get one or two things. Every single person has with the way he or she, and that is why we have to go back to the point of humility. If we are humble and we respect every single person's opinion and we respect every single person's say, I think we'll be on a better shape to respect every person dignity and also what they're bringing to the table. Also, trauma is something
Absolutely.
that will always be with us. And that is why I would like to drive to this area because a lot of people, even if our listeners that might be listening currently, they could be carrying unspoken pain. You're a person
Mhm.
who realized a lot of pain. And I'm so surprised that you said you were just writing and it was just coming and coming and coming, which shows that everything has been installed a long time. It is just weighing itself out. How do you think someone can begin to identify and acknowledge the trauma that they may have inherited from previous generations, Mrs. Lisa?
Well, the best way to recognize that is in the patterns that repeat, or in what we see typically as our failures. So, what we often categorize as our failures in life are generational trauma passed down. Um, you know, uh, in my case, let me give you an example. My family, my grandparents were Eastern European immigrants,
Okay.
both on both sides. And so my parents were the first generation born in the US, but they carried so much trauma and pain with them from, war and poverty and struggle. And, the only way Eastern Europeans are very hardened people because they have struggled so much. And the only way that they move forward is to pack it away and pretend it's not there and continue, but that comes out in a coldness. It comes out in silence. It comes out in, like, and it was passed on to my parents. But then they had their own trauma. Like my mother, for example, she was one of five children, and she had an older sister, like 5 years older than her, who at the age of 12, a drunk driver lost control of their car and ran over her legs, and this was, I mean, the 1920s. So they didn't have the technology and they tried to save her legs. My mother shared a bed with her. Her skin was turning black and falling off. And then they had to amputate her leg from the knee down at 12 years old. And, my mother was erased in the midst of that trauma. Her existence, she didn't exist. She was in the background because everything was about my aunt. The only story she ever told of it was when she was with my grandmother and she ran into someone that knew her, and she said, "Who is this?" And my grandmother said, "My daughter." And she's like, "Oh, I only knew about the other one. No one knew about my mother." It's like she didn't exist. But that shapes who you are. How they carried that silence from the trauma was, and then there was trauma that happened in my family, immediate family too, before I was born. So I was born into the echo of it because my sister and brother are 8 and 14 years older. So by the time I was born, all this trauma had happened in my immediate family that further made my parents distant and cold because they were just trying to get through every day and pack away all that had happened in their lives, personally and inherited ancestral trauma. But the best way to notice it in your life is to really get honest with yourself. Where do your patterns repeat? Like for me, I was always drawn to emotionally unavailable men because my family was very emotionally unavailable, but that went through generations. And because they were trying, that's the only way that they could deal with the trauma that they couldn't process was to become pack away their emotions, and their emotions were not available. Same with scarcity. Scarcity is something that's generational. If, that came from the ancestry of, of war and, oppression. And so, that carries on whether you realize it or not and plays out in your life until it's acknowledged. And as a society, we are encouraged to not acknowledge our pain and just keep moving forward. People don't
Yeah.
like to hear the truth about pain. They recoil when you talk about anything that's not pretty. And it's become more that way, with social media. And but that's not the reality of life. We're feeling human beings, and our emotions run deep, and illness comes out of unprocessed emotions. And we really need to be very aware of where the patterns repeat in our family and the history of our families and what we carry forward deep inside our bodies, because it's in our cellular memory. And we need to acknowledge it and grieve it. I mean, I have, I talked about the bare bone is one of my reframes, and it came up to me because I've always been the kind of, in my family, they were all shut down emotionally, but I was always the feeling one. And I had a conversation several years ago with a friend of mine who she's a recovering alcoholic. And we were talking about how she would drink herself to oblivion every night just to be able to sleep. Sometimes she couldn't even sleep. I mean, she just couldn't deal with her life and her trauma that she had never processed. And I said, imagine me, like I've never been able to do that. I can't numb to the pain. I have to feel it till it's unbearable. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've been in, such a bad place and I wished I could numb some way. But I've never been a person who's been able to do that. And so I coined a term called the bare boned for those like me who are just not able to do that. And every soul, when in my belief, every soul that comes here has its mission or has its curriculum. And the bare boned are those who choose to heal generational trauma, to close karmic loops, and to seal out soul contracts. And oftentimes, I believe that those bare boned are it's your last incarnation, so you're leaving nothing on the table so that you can move on as a soul. But the bare boned are the ones who heal the generational trauma because you can't heal if you can't feel. So you have to stay, mercilessly awake through every ache in order to feel it, to heal it, and acknowledge it. Because if you start checking out, then you can't acknowledge and heal it.
That is
But not that's not everybody's curriculum. So just to back up, I mean, everyone has what their soul agreed to before they came here. And if that's not yours, you can still acknowledge your generational trauma, and you don't have to be the one to speak it and widely acknowledge it, but acknowledge it for yourself so that you are not carrying it forward.
recognizing our patterns is one of the best way we can try to know our generational pain, because these are things that we do not really know, because we're in a position whereby we see that we're having this situation, but we do not try our best to just recognize is that I think I'm facing a situation in my life that it is repeating on its own, and that's where we have to know that I think I am facing a generational thing. And when we recognize it, as you said, the physical and the spiritual parts really work hand in hand, and we have to work with it with our soul. our soul is something that we have to nourish, we have to take care of to also help us align with this trauma. Because I've also been in a position whereby I have to be honest with you, I've seen someone whereby the kids, because I've taught it to some children, because I usually teach some children sometimes. I saw those children, and anytime someone just maybe talk to them aggressively, they usually cry. And I wanted surprised, what's going on? The sisters, they are all girls. The header, the eldest, they will cry. That shows that there's something that is a transcending pattern regarding the background of the family. And that is why I agree with you that, because I do agree with you that your family during that time from the European coming to the United States and having a lot of traumas, things like that. I do agree with you because those things can really transcend on the next generation and generation. But it is when we now recognize those patterns that these are the things I do repeatedly, then we can now try to know how we can fix it. Now, it is not about also fixing it. It's about how we are even knowing that this thing we are trying to fix is actually something we are fixing, because there's nothing that comes very fast. We cannot fix something that has been happening since probably since childhood. We can't fix it within 6 months or 3 months. It's going to take
No,
a
of
lot
course.
of time. It's going to take a lot of time. And that is why I like to drive to this question, Mrs. Lisa. Quick fixes approach are everywhere. People want something that is very fast. How can it just happen in a day or 2 days? But how do you think listeners can try their best to distinguish between performative healing and real sustainable transformation, Mrs. Lisa?
Well, performative healing gives you only temporary relief, and it's only addressing temporarily the ache. The ache goes much, much deeper. And as I said, there's no way, I wish there were a way to get to that deep transformation without going through the mud. You have to go through the mud and the muck to get there. And it's scary. It's really scary. But if you really want to heal, there's no other way. I mean, most people, and I know many, many people like this who just bury all their pain and they, make light of life and everything is, good vibes and they don't ever want to talk about anything that's not pretty. And that's just not the reality of life. I mean, look around. I mean, there's so much suffering in this world. And, you have to acknowledge it because it's part of the human experience. It's part of the soul's experience, and our inability or refusal to acknowledge that will keep us from healing. And we've really got to take a that's what I'm trying to do through the reframes, is I'm hoping that it will help people realize that performative spirituality is just keeping us stuck in a loop. It is not moving us forward. And it's not the reality of what spiritual awakening or healing looks like. And we've been misled by that. And as I want to reaffirm that I'm not criticizing from above, I'm criticizing from having been within. I had a situation earlier this year. I was in such a desperate place in my life that I was giving my power away, to these healers. I don't know, do we have time for this story? It's pretty powerful because it was real change, a real transformation point. Do we have a few minutes for that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have to uh, preface it by saying in Mexico, brujeria or black magic magic is a part of the culture here. So it's not unusual if something happens for someone to say, "Oh, somebody put some magic on you." So earlier this year, I came home. I was in a really bad place, and I came home, and my sliding glass doors are floor to ceiling. And I walk in and I see this something on the sliding glass doors. And I walk closer, and there's a full imprint of a bird that had hit the glass so hard, its whole body was imprinted, wingspan, everything. And I knew it couldn't have survived that. So I was like, where is this bird? And I'm looking for it. I have cats, and I see a little drop of blood and a few feathers, and there's no bird. So I knew the cats carried it off. I'm looking for it, and I find it in my closet with its head ripped off and feathers everywhere. And my roommate, she's Mexican, and she and I have both been working a little with this self-proclaimed shaman to help me and her independently. And so she contacted him, and he told us that it was, oh, someone sent a witch like to check on you and your cats, like our extension of you, and you're very powerful, and you killed the cats. Killing the witch was you killing it. And just he told us we needed to come to where he lived, which was like 2.5 hours away. We went, and for 2 days, he sent us on this wild goose chase, all smoke and mirrors. We never saw him. And he sent us he kept like scolding us that we weren't doing what we were supposed to do, but there were vague instructions. And then the second day, he sends us on this hike and said it should take 2 hours there and back, but vague instructions again. It took us 5.5 hours. We were running out of water. It was getting dark. And I finally said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going home. And the next day I told her, I said, I am done giving my power away. I've been putting my belief in him, and I'm taking my power back. I will not work with him anymore. I've disregarded my gut because I was so desperate. And that's performative spirituality, what he did. It was all performance, but no results. And I had been stuck in that loop, not just with him, the peyote ceremonies and this and that, looking for somebody to save me. But I realized in the end, the only person who could save me was me, and I had to take my power back. And that's the problem with performative spirituality. It wants you to hand your power over so you can keep paying them. It's not about the results, it's about keeping you in the loop so that you keep coming back. And it's a great disservice to people. I mean, there's so many people like myself and many more who have spent years and years and lots of money trying to with performative spirituality, trying to get to an awakening or
Yeah.
to heal, and it's just not happening, and they don't know how to get past that. Luckily, I didn't either. I had no idea. But then, when I took my power back, that's when the writing started and started flowing, and then I
Wow.
realized where my power was. It was in addressing the deep dark part of it, and then alchemizing it to turn it around, not to wallow in pity for what I've been through, but to realize what I could learn from that and how that might help others.
This is a very big lesson to a lot of people. Like people could be listening right here. It defines a lot. And we have to understand that our power is with us. And we should not be in a position we hand over this power to someone else, any other person that could use it the way he or she likes, or even manipulate it in a way that we are not comfortable with. If we want to be happy, it comes from us. If we also want to be sad, it is from us. If we want to be very, very amazing feeling, it says of what it is also from us. And we have to try our best to understand that if we can work on ourselves and develop ourselves and become much stronger, we will not be in a position whereby anyone around us or anyone around the world will be in a position to, flip flop us. And that is what we do not want for our life. I am so glad you realized and you took back that power. You took back that authority. And that is when you started realizing that you can write, we can do some beautiful and beautiful and beautiful things, because this thing is something that, so most of the time we will not just realize it. And that is why I love what you said earlier. We need to recognize those patterns, because we might not just know, we might just be doing it and be doing it and be doing it, but we do not know that I think this is a pattern. Then when we recognize it, then we can try our best to take back this power, work on ourselves, and become more productive in society. I am so glad that you are healing and you are doing something very productive, and it's definitely inspiring to others, so they will understand better how these things also work to improve their life as well. Also, lastly, I would just like to drive to one thing you think, or one truth if the listeners could take away about embracing their pain to create clarity, resilience, and growth. What do you think it will be, Mrs. Lisa?
Well, until we embrace our pain and learn how we grow. A diamond is created under extreme pressure and fire and heat. only through that can a diamond be created, and that applies to us too.
Yeah.
We have to address our shadow side so we can heal and live fully, because if we're living in denial and burying all those things, we're not really living, we're surviving.
Thank you so much for the beautiful insight. Every single one of us will experience pain, we will experience setback, but it is how we try our best to deal with it. We should deal with it with ourselves. We should know how we could work on ourselves to deal with this pain, because we shouldn't be in a position to look for a way to transcend our power just to relieve our pain or anything like that. It doesn't help most of the time. It is temporary. And that is what we need to. We need something that is permanent, something that will be in a position that if that same thing happens again, it will not get to us. We'll be strong enough to deal with it. That is the position. And that is where diamonds are being brought up. That is where golds are being brought up. Before we see golds, we are going to sweat. Before we see diamonds, we are going to sweat. And even before, when we even see those gold in the ground, there are still a lot of processing that are meant to be done. And that is how it should be. There will be pain, and those pain will come. How we deal with those inner things, how we deal with those generational pain, how we transcend to work on it, shows the kind of diamond and the gold that we find in ourselves. I want to thank you for that beautiful insight. And also, there's a question I normally ask during the end of the show, Mrs. Lisa. From our forefathers, from our ancestors, there are a lot of beautiful things that do exist during our ancestral time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, Mrs. Lisa, what do you think that thing would be, Mrs. Lisa?
Wow, it's what I call, well, I am obsessed with this word. It's a Nahuatl. Nahuatl is a ancient Aztec language, and this word comes from the Nahuatl language, and it's apapacho. Apapacho is a hug from the soul. So I say when our arms run out of room, it's what our soul does. It extends. And there used to be more apapacho in this world because, family units were more connected. We're connected through technology now, but we're less emotionally connected. And that is what's missing in the world. People, the care for one another in small ways as well as large ways. We overlook, our neighbor. We overlook the person walking down the street. We're so self-focused. And Apapacho is all about that. It's not only in the physical hug, but it's in, when you try to help somebody, that you don't know, or it's how you send your friend a message because they're going through a hard time and they just, need to know that your presence is there. It's in the small things on a day-to-day basis as well as the big things, but people have become so self-focused anymore that's missing. And my mission is to make Apapacho a world movement. I'm in the process of writing a book called Apapacho, a Soul Hug for the World.
Would definitely be
So that's something I think, I would like to see the world embrace and get back to the soul level.
Would definitely be expecting that a papacho. I think I got it right, to be honest. I got it right. So I think we are losing a lot of connection, family, physical connection, and showing a sense of care, love, and attention towards each other. Those are the things that we think we need to build back. As they used to say, we're in the Gen Z generation, but we should try our best to embrace ourselves with love, care, and see ourselves with humility, because we are also all going to come together again and say we have lost a loved one. And that is the beauty of the world we find ourselves. All these things we have around us, I'm just like a tool that I'm just using to do this. All these things we have around us are just the material that we have for the main time. And we are also going to leave it when the time comes. And we have to continue to have the sense of humanity, connection, coming together, and showing the sense of love, which is one of the things I believe will be a perpetual, to be honest. So I also want to use this opportunity to thank you for the time, the opportunity. I am so glad you are strong now. And using this opportunity to inspire others to also say you can also be strong. You can also be a person that you stand your ground, and you can also be more productive no matter what comes by the way. Thank you so much, Mrs. Lisa.
And thank you so much, Demi. I really appreciate your time and sharing your space with me.
All right. Have a wonderful day, Mrs. Lisa. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.